Hello, and welcome to The Last Generation. I'm Melanie, and this is the first time I'm recording an article because I know my shit is long. So I am trying something new. Bear with me. You might hear a lot of lip smacks, my dog barking or squeaking her toy, and I probably will be caught off guard by my typos. I won't be doing any sound editing just because I am tired. So here we go. Title, The Subtle Art of Pretending to Protest. The Truth Behind the Brett Kavanaugh Hearings. As protesters flock into Washington, D.C. tomorrow for its much larger protests than last week, and the entire country believes headlines and what they see with hashtags, you probably should know the truth behind what September 27, 2018 was really like. D.C. protests are a liker's paradise, a lurker's playpen, and an internet troll's live dream post stream. She was the E, and I was the S. The last S in the word abusers. On a true humid, demon, mosquito-filled night in the South, I found myself in front of the White House with peaceful protesters called the Kremlin Annex. They refer to Trump as Putin's assistant. They had been protesting for 72 days. Each night, a very dedicated group of what appeared to be seniors in lime vests holds up happily lit letters with a new word or phrase, and a really cool, smooth, criminally guy sings in a mic with the letter holders doing the wave. From cover-up to perjury to call the FBI, with a mere 900 followers on Facebook and in a time of demis and flagellators and hashtags. It's odd that no one really knows about the Kremlin Annex. They dance in front of the White House every night, for fuck's sake. I showed up on the full moon's eve of the word abusers. Never did I expect that night to lead me down the extremist road into everything I'm against, shape-shifting. For the better half of a day, I became a marching follower because I was lost in a city where so many advertised leaders. Since Zoe Barnes couldn't make it to the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, I'm filling in. Hi, I'm Melanie. I'm a reporter for your Post. Yeah, I write about all the shit you post. The truth is, I will never lie to you here. It was my first time and night in the nation's capital, and while frustrated for personal reasons, I was touristing around looking for the White House. I walked past a White House and thought, no way, that can't be the White House. It's so tiny. That must be where Melania lives. Plus, there's like 5 people out here, and there's no Secret Service. And where the fuck is Sinbad? Without giving the iconic building a second glance, I kept walking and looking for the White House. 20 minutes later, I Googled the White House, and to my ignorance and American stupidity, I cowered with embarrassment and whispered in my mind, thank God no one will ever know I didn't know what the White House looked like. I thought the Capitol building was the White House. Oops. Back to abusers. After finding myself back at the teeny tiny house, it wasn't like what you see in the movies or news. There were maybe 30 people out front. One lady assured it was considered a crowded night. The Kremlin Annex was there and asked for volunteers to hold up letters in protest. My body reacted faster than my mind because I'll admit it, since Brett Kavanaugh can't. I blacked out. My resistance to narcissistic social media was put on hold when I saw a girl holding letter E streaming a Facebook Live sesh. By the way she was reporting on the scene, she seemed like an influencer with millions watching. I was dancing around, taking live video selfies with my Facebook, chanting chants, and feeling like I was important for just one moment while a whole 3 people watched my shit. I didn't even know what I was protesting. For me, it was just for the sake of being free to do what I wanted in front of a very powerful palace. Are you coming Thursday? Asked letter E. Letter E is this beautiful woman who looks 30 max and shows every sign that she's just got it. You know, politics. Even though I never heard her speak about the current events or actual facts, I presumed she was informed and that she was a leader. She's the type of person that walks into a room and you wonder what she's up to for no reason other than because it looks like she's doing something. "What's Thursday?" I responded. "The Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Do you know who that is? You have to come." "Oh yeah, that guy nominated that's accused of sexual assault. Oh, I'm so there. I wouldn't miss it." That was all I really knew. Like most in sunny SoCal, I had read a bit about him, knew he was a conservative, highly intelligent, a threat to abortion rights, and women were coming forward claiming sexual assault. I didn't know much about how a Supreme Court judge was elected, that there were 2 senators to every state, and that being a Supreme Court justice was for life. I understood that before he had the chance to speak, he was being crucified, but I didn't know how bad it was until the day of the hearing, the trial. But this was no surprise. Whether right or wrong, we crucify men every day for the sake of Me Too. I know this is a touchy subject. I stand with women 100%, but something feels icky about how we can destroy a life without facts, and how quickly we pick sides. Trump is trying to reformat Me Too, and if we continue to make a mockery of it, he'll win. We live in a time of internet trolls. Words have meaning, and no one really thinks about the chain reaction of hashtags and over-sensationalized media. Yesterday, Trump said, "It's a scary and difficult time for young men, but it's always been a scary time for young women and Black men, and walking the streets at night alone is a gender privilege. Not all women are truthful, and clearly men aren't either, and our justice system has failed us if we need to scream at senators in front of cameras inside the Capitol to be heard." Letter E wore a Kavanaugh shirt, and her overall sense of assurance assured me that this Kava whatever guy needed to be burned at the stake. This topic and seeking the moral of it all fascinates me, so naturally I was in, and my shape was shifting inside the Dom. We added each other to Facebook, and the next 3 days of my life were, how you say, unspiritual. Every type of person I try not to be was in Washington, D.C. Bear with me here. I and the tiny Kremlin Annex crowd bopped around and chanted, "Love Trump's hate. No means no." But then something about Putin's putang. And after repeating it twice, I stopped. It didn't feel right, and for sure not peaceful. To me, being an American that fights for what is right doesn't require bullshit or putang. When negativity stirs the pot, what you eat will never taste good. When I stopped chanting, I said, "I don't think I believe in this phrase." And one of the Kremlin Annex organizers heard me and rejected my Facebook friend request after. Later, I looked at my Facebook stories, and my night looked so much bigger than what it was. I questioned why I felt the need to post the stories, and my answer is, I did it because, like many narcissistic stories, it made me feel powerful by making my whole 3 viewers feel like they were missing out. This is a form of unconscious storytelling that I am very much against. Letter E's Facebook stories were unreal, but so real. For the next day, she managed to take selfies with some of the most powerful people in the country, and all I questioned was, how the hell does she know what they even look like? She was right where the action was, sleeping by the Capitol building, but I don't think she ever slept. With no exaggeration, in 2 days, she managed to take photos with and enter the offices of Chuck Grassley, Lindsey Graham, that flake guy, Mitch McConnell, Doug Jones, Dianne Feinstein, Chris Coons, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, the eloquent Richard Blumenthal, and fucking Alyssa Milano, just to name a fraction. She attended meetings, vigils, protests, and the fucking Kremlin Annex every night. Her live Facebook story footage was only seen by around 15 people, and yet she had more access than any newscaster in the country. There is no documentation like hers. She had a different shirt with a different message for each event. And to my biggest surprise, she was almost 40 and a dynamic supermother of 4 young children. Chapter, remember, the 27th of September. The sun had not yet risen over Washington, D.C. It was 5 a.m. and I had planned to get to Dirksen's Senate office building where the hearing was going to be extra early. Turns out judicial hearings are open to the public and are usually held in a bigger room next door at the Hart Senate building. But to keep the circus small, they chose to have the Brett Kavanaugh versus Christine Blasey Ford's trial in a smaller room. I checked my Facebook, and letter E was already there at 4 a.m. Her presence made me get the fuck up out of bed and physically sprint to the fucking Capitol. On my way there, I was so mad at myself for not waking up earlier. She was a mom of 4 and got the fuck up. Everything she posted on Facebook seemed exciting and rebellious, and when there's a keep out sign, I'm the first to run past it. I thought, there's got to be thousands outside by now. I arrived and there was maybe 40 people waiting in line. Maybe 40. Letter E was on the other side of the building at a different entrance where she was given a check-in number. As I waited in line watching her live stories, I felt like I was missing out on what was happening on the other side of the building. When the doors opened, I got inside quickly with no problem, and the catch was the public wasn't allowed in the hearing. They were allowed in the overflow room 3 floors up from the hearing to watch from TVs. The only public allowed in was family, celebrities like Alyssa Milano, whoever the fuck that is, press, and a lot of flatulence. Flatulence. I stood in the middle of this very modern building with 1984 Chi, and a woman in her 60s who was in line with me earlier approached with 3 other women. 1 young with dreadlocks, 1 blonde clean-cut conservative, and 1 pretty basic. I figured they were there to protest Kavanaugh too. We keep crossing paths and I feel called to you right now. Do you believe in Jesus? She said. I had no idea what was about to happen, but the world is my oyster and good stories happen when you let them. And I was feeling some type of magic was about to go down. Sort of. I immediately felt the past year and remembered when I had screamed to God in a jungle in Kauai and he had answered me. I don't know about Jesus, but I believe in praying and the power of prayer. From that moment, I was surrounded with intense attention. Well, I'm Linda R. Herbert, and I'm a pastor from the Covenant Life Church, and Jesus is telling me to talk to you, specifically you. Do you have a moment? Go ahead and record this if you like. I pulled out my phone and started to record the audio you hear above. Unfortunately, letter E called me in the middle, so my recorder stopped. But you'll get it. Linda foretold me. She said Jesus was talking to her, and in precise detail, she told me that I was struggling in life, but that Jesus was with me, and my life was about to take off. At first, I smirked at the presumable Jesus scam. But then she went so deep that either my mom planted a microphone in her ear or she was straight magic. She spoke of me in specifics, said I was given a gift that I recently started to use, and it was important I use it on a larger platform. Cough, cough, the last generation. She must have talked to me for 10 minutes before she turned the microphone to the girl with dreadlocks. She was white, dreaded, and felt kind. She told me that I was a storyteller, a possible graphic designer and writer, and I was in search of the truth, and I needed to continue to use my weapon to search for the truth. Funny because I refer to my writing as my weapon, and the point of the last generation is to find the moral to every story. She said, in the next 2 weeks, I will be given 3 very important options, and 1 will be bad. She seemed more like a medium rather than the voice of Jesus, but I guess there isn't much of a difference because the divine is the divine. Then, after each woman talked to me through God, they did a final calling. They all touched my shoulders and joined hands, and Pastor Linda put her entire hand on my head, and like what you see on TV, she called upon Jesus, and I was blessed, and I thought a beam of light was going to come down on me, and I was going to explode. There are no words for this. It literally happened in the middle of the Senate building. Like, no joke. There was a moment when I recalled a cult documentary doing something similar, but then I told myself to stop, listen, and enjoy. We parted ways, and I never looked once at what they were wearing. They were good women, whatever they believed. They were kind to me. Letter E called me and told me to come to Chuck Grassley's office to protest. I didn't know who the fuck Chuck Grassley was, but I story-timed it anyways. The group of us colorful-looking gender, non-gender feminists were not let inside, but Pastor Linda and the 3 apostles walked right in, and that's when I heard a girl in the group go crazy. They're wearing Brett Kavanaugh shirts. My first reaction was, oh my God, did they just play me? Was I on camera? The girl went on, how can women wear Brett Kavanaugh shirts? They're pro-rapists. They're racist. The one with the dreads, she has dreads. What the fuck? Another girl screams, that's the racist part of her, the dreads. She has no right to have dreads. Cultural appropriation. They started to yell at the kind women I had just met, and before you know it, Letter E was zipping away to Kamala Harris's office, and the screaming girls, the group of colorful protesters, and myself followed her. As we reached Kamala Harris's office, I sensed something was off. The screaming girls started to cry like fangirls. They were such fans of Kamala Harris that they began to cry by just entering her office without her there. You could compare them to girls who would freak over Justin Bieber. To feel that passionate about someone is a beautiful thing, but they looked maybe 22 and it seemed overkill. But maybe I'm in the wrong. I barely knew who California's state senators were, and they did, so crying over the lady might have had precedent. But I already felt the extremes. When I asked one of the girls why she loved Harris so much, she said, she's half Indian like me, a woman and in the Senate. Policies and beliefs were never mentioned. We all left Post-it notes in her office. I took a Cliff Bar and wrote down thelastgen.com Thoughts Become Things in her guest book. The crying girls also made a photo in the New York Times, crying. Question: do all feminists have to be liberal? I'm learning there are subcultures to 2018's feminists, from butt girls who like to hashtag feminist, but prostitute their bodies for likes, internet bullies, the truly educated, the real doers, and lastly, the followers who feel the need to have a label but aren't sure where they stand. Letter E storms to the Supreme Court, and we follow her. She tosses me a Sharpie to write on my hand, and I copy her. We believe you, I wrote. She jumps in front of cameras with a group of women in silence with her hand Sharpied up. I got in the photo, stood there, and then Melanie, my true self, smacked me in the face. Why the fuck am I doing this? Yes, I wasn't well informed and educated on the case, but there was something much more troubling. Why were strangers all following Letter E, including myself? I believe Christine Blasey Ford, and without protesters, she would have been treated like Anita Hill, and many of the women there were victims of sexual assault and understood what being unheard feels like. But I didn't know where I stood, and the trial hadn't even started yet. Why did I want to get into a photo with people I may or may not want to stand with? Photos can haunt you for life, yet alone what you write in a yearbook. This Brett Kavanaugh whatever guy hadn't even spoken yet, and women were making him out to be Bill Cosby. It's true. Look, everyone feels the way they feel, but I was just following along. So how many others were too? I felt like if Letter E left my sight, I'd be lost and wouldn't know what was going on or what building to go to next. But the truth was, she was winging it. She just talked to everyone, recorded every moment, kept moving, and welcomed anyone that wanted to join. The Daily Beast Sam Stein just reported on a protester from last week that is a victim of sexual assault. She said, I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I came and I found the activist leaders and I said to them, what do you want me to do? I'll do it. This is the problem. Following people and doing anything for them because you're lost. You can't determine if a random stranger is a good leader in a day. And of all places, one should be careful at the nation's capital. I was her, but I found my way. You know that lovely Kanye song that says, you're such a fucking hoe. I love it. Well, that feeling I got was if you blasted the song during the protests, one woman would start to move her hips, then another, and then before you know it, there would be a choreographed dance on the forbidden steps of the Supreme Court. Call my vision awful, but just this past weekend, my dream of the hypocrisy dance aired on SNL. And aside from a few Twitter rants, most enjoyed it. I'm a sick fuck, and I only aim to offend offenders. Fucking uber-feminist Roxanne Gay admitted in a TED Talks that she can't help but dance to Dirt Nasty hip-hop. I decided to go be my own person and head back to Dirksen. When I got inside, I saw that around 10 people from the Women's March organization was there. They were all wearing Melania's Forever 21 style green jacket with the phrase "November is coming" on their backs. For those of you Los Angelinos who didn't know, like myself, November is supposed to be the most important election to date. I talked to one Women's March gal, Sandy, who had just moved to DC, and she told me she joined the Women's March a few days before and explained that they strategically plan when their protesters would get arrested. How stupid of me to think they got arrested by surprise or out of passion. They trained protesters on how and what to chant. Their protest strategy was carefully planned, from when to wave their hands in protest, to when to blow whistles, to when to wear edgy jackets. They sure looked great on the Washington Post and Instagram. Sandy asked me if I wanted tape. I asked why, and she said, "I think it's to put on your mouth for when we silently protest." So I took a piece of sticky black plastic and put it on my mouth for a selfie. But again, something felt so wrong, like I violated myself. I thought we were supposed to use our voices. There were other women asking what the tape was for, and minutes later, it was on their mouths too. I get it looks shocking. The photo made the New Yorker. Kavanaugh supporters had nicely designed shirts with serif font. They looked planned out. I never once saw a supporter verbally abuse a leftist protester. I thought liberals were supposed to support the Second Amendment, yet women in Kavanaugh shirts were screamed at. Planned Parenthood was there too. They gave me a shirt that I've been proudly wearing to convince myself that it was okay to go to Planned Parenthood at 13. Buttons were made and given out freely, and yet still there was a sense of disorganization, and no one really knew what was happening. The basic plan was to occupy the building and protest and get in front of cameras. Every time I asked a Women's March protester in uniform what was happening next, I got the response, "I'm not sure. I know at noon we're going to the monument." Then I asked, "Well, is anyone going to watch the actual hearing?" And a few responded, "No, I think. We're supposed to stay in here." I questioned who was actually thinking on their own. I went and got a pumpkin spice latte and watched the hearing on my own at Ebenezer's. I started to feel like my own person again. I first listened. I learned that I believe her, and despite if Kavanaugh is innocent or not, his grotesque rage, dodging of questions, and uncalled for remarks were enough. He's long sat in a position of power and has forgotten what it feels like to be on the other side. We need to build a better foundation for how we raise boys. Boys will be boys is a culture we've normalized. It needs to be approached differently. The truth. Without protesters being in front of cameras and without the live footage of a woman screaming at Senator Flake in an elevator, an FBI investigation would have never happened. If there were no protesters in support of her at the nation's capital, and Dr. Ford still had her hearing, then the outcome would have been very different. The bigger truth starts with a question. How did the woman find Senator Flake in an elevator? How did and does letter E manage to get access to the nation's most powerful leaders? How was I able to walk into Kamala Harris's office and jack a Cliff Bar? To answer, there weren't that many people there, and there's not a whole lot of security. The blunt truth is all the crazy protests you saw on the news weren't all that crazy. Letter E managed to get her photo in the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, all over IG, and many other outlets. How? Yes, she was September 27th's most prominent unreported vigilante that made sure she was in the action and jumped in front of every camera, including her own, But out of all the people in this huge country, there weren't even enough protesters to fill the Dirksen building full. Had there been a bird's eye view camera and a reporter with another agenda, you would have seen a building only a third full. The protesters moved from one location to the other, and the cameras followed, making it look like Washington, D.C. was being overran by angry women. But with a little speed and hunger, getting into a senator's office and taking a selfie with him or her is easier than getting into a producer's office in Hollywood. If you look closely, all over the press, the same women are in different photos by several outlets. So what does this all mean? In 2 days, Letter E secured private funding through donations to rent housing in D.C. for this week's protests. Social media claims the protests will be crazier than last week. She will be housing over 40 women who are disabled, handicapped, or who need accommodation to be in D.C. for the protests. She's a powerhouse, and not only was she at a Planned Parenthood event today in her home state, New York, she was at a Democratic meeting yesterday, and her presence and documentation of the hearing is so rare that it gives her power. Information is power. But what real-life information does she have? Now 40 new women will be following her around D.C. chanting, good or bad, in a sea of social media influencers. We must start to consider who we follow. Everyone on Facebook who saw my post suddenly thought I was well-informed and a political beast that came to D.C. for politics. This is shamefully untrue. Last night, without question, or a please or thank you, Letter E had me designing a sketch of her face for her newly founded Facebook group with no mention of the word we. The New York Times featured a photo of her. She wanted me to replicate it as a sketch because, as she put it, it was iconic. So without question, I adjusted and adjusted until it was perfect. Why did I do this? I never do free work. It was because I was following someone in fear that if I didn't, I'd be missing out and I wouldn't be invited to the awesome party she was about to throw in D.C. Narcissistic or not, I'd want people to know who I was if I was that active and raised funding for 40 women in 2 days. She's fucking incredible. Still, at this moment, I'm figuring out how I can help her rather than really thinking of how to help the women. What does that say about me? I know nothing about her politics except on Thursday, there's a women's march, and she announced that the 40 women she was housing will follow her and go balls to the wall against Kavanaugh and the Republican senators. When I asked her what she thought about what if Kavanaugh didn't get confirmed and about that one super conservative Amy Coney Barrett, had to Google her name, she responded, I don't know. Hopefully it would get pushed till after the midterms. She didn't know much about her. I was surprised because if this girl doesn't, then no one does. I reviewed all her stories again, and she talks about where she is at the current moment, Stop Kavanaugh, and what senator she got a photo with, but no factual politics. I think what Letter E is doing is admirable, self-serving, rare, super, for the cameras, and that she embodies the qualities of a politician. In 2 days, she gained over 200 followers on Facebook and counting, raised thousands, and will have a culture of 40 people standing by her side come Thursday. Someone give this girl the podium. FYI news to everyone. On Monday, October 1st, 2018, Trump told the media that he ordered the FBI to do the most complex investigation possible, but they only have up until Friday. And up until today, he's refrained from attacking Dr. Ford. But he just went on the lowest low, I don't know, attack he's ever flagellated. The leader of this free country openly mocked a woman who was sexually assaulted. Why is he all loosey-goosey now? Well, Trump is actually not stupid, and House of Cards is real. Extreme protesters, are being played. No one is talking about Christine Blasey Ford's flaws. Her testimony seemed honest. I do believe her. And an investigation should have happened. I believe sexual assault allegations should 1,000% be taken serious. And she may be a good woman, but no one is perfect. And I put money on there's dirt on her too. Trump's got dirt on her. She said she didn't like flying, but flies all around the world for vacations. Like Kavanaugh, exaggerations were made. If Kavanaugh doesn't get confirmed, we must question why Trump is at ease. To me, the prediction is obvious. If there isn't dirt on Ford, then he'll rush confirm Amy Coney Barrett by having exhausted extremists in the entire Senate. If there's anything we've learned, it's that Grassley dude has no patience. The process will be rushed. The truth is a theory. If only a few are standing where something is happening, then they're the only ones that can say they saw it, and you have to take their word for it. Regardless of what you stand for, on September 27th, not many people were in Washington, D.C., and they interstellared the course of history. We're all trolling Instagram and skimming headlines, but there are letters A, B, U, S, E, R, S in Washington this week that will have their way because you weren't there. If September 27th was considered a wild protest, then I'm disappointed. The moral to the story. They all say, be part of history, but wouldn't you rather be part of the future? Think for yourself before you follow. Not everyone is a leader, and it's important to not follow someone around just because you don't know where else to go. Ask questions about what streets they've been on and where they like to eat before just going. If you do go, leave when you're just not feeling it anymore, because no one really cares what you do. Listen respectfully. We're all just people. If you really have no clue, go to a coffee shop, use their free Wi-Fi to educate yourself for an hour, and think about what you want. Ebenezer's in DC is a good place to start. Personal. Hey, like I said, I will never lie to you here. And like I always say, I'm a hypocrite at the top of her game. I wish so badly I could be in DC tomorrow. But paying my rent took precedent over the country. A month ago, on a date with yet another asshole, I told him I felt called to move to DC. When he asked why, I was honest, and I said, I want to get smarter. 4 days in the nation's capital made me smarter. In the past week, I've never crammed more information in my head. I can explain the entire Supreme Court election process and have analyzed the radicalism of protesters and how to master manipulate them because the majority are clueless and looking for someone to follow. We're all in search of a king. From being prophesized by a pastor to letter E to Trump to senators to social media influencers, I'm lucky to have the strength to think on my own, but so many don't and fall into chanting about things they may not agree with. I gravely worry for today. My soul rejects this whole right, left, Dem thing. Just because someone is a conservative doesn't mean they don't care about women. Last week, after listening to each senator's compelling arguments, my mind kept changing. Why? Because I'm politically uneducated and because I'm simply human with an open mind looking for the good in people. No matter how many beers or farts and disturbing huffs and puffs, it comes down to how someone makes you feel. I don't feel Brett Kavanaugh is the right person to defend the Constitution. I will not tape my mouth shut again. Here at The Last Generation, we're neither left or right. We're just in search of what's right and wrong. Since I can't make it to DC, I guess I'll be watching Letter E's live stories. You probably should too. Side note, every time I fucking write something, the New York Times writes about it a week later. I wrote an entire thing on the shapeshifter. I wrote about the shapeshifter 2 weeks ago. It kills me, and then they wrote it. Really hope this writing thing takes off one day. Subscribe to The Last Generation if you want a New York Times article 1 week before the New York Times writes it. Updates. I reconnected with Pastor Linda R. Herbert, and her CV is the most respectable. She's a 9/11 survivor. She's married, 57, and a 2015 retired active duty Army colonel. She spent a year in Iraq during combat and was awarded a Bronze Star and a Combat Action Badge. She has a PhD in counseling, 4 master's degree, and is currently pursuing another master's in divinity. She's also a pastor of a church near DC and has been pastoring for over 20 years. Holy shit. Please excuse my language because my jaw just dropped. She also told me the girl with dreads was not a medium, but rather a messenger from God, because mediums are the devil. And I believe. More updates may come. Please check the bottom of this post. Thanks for listening to thelastgeneration.com. You mean everything to me. And we'll see where this goes. Bye.